humanity had always been considered insignificant in the grand scale of the galaxy. Their small, blue planet orbiting an unremarkable star was no more than a speck in the vast cosmos. The galactic empires, massive, technologically advanced, and ancient, paid little attention to Earth. That was, until the Zelthor arrived. The Zelthor, a race of towering, multi-limbed creatures, had been conquering planets for millennia, leaving destruction in their wake. Their empire spanned dozens of star systems, and their war machine was unstoppable. When they set their sights on Earth, the humans had no hope. The Zelthor's weapons were far beyond anything humanity could even imagine. And yet, humanity refused to accept its fate. The invasion came swiftly. The first wave of Zelthor warships arrived in Earth's orbit with no warning. For hours, the skies were filled with the sound of bombardments, and cities across the globe were wiped off the map. The Zelthor's advanced technology made Earth's defenses look like toys, missiles vaporized before they could even leave the launch pads, fighter jets turned to ash before they could take off. The overwhelming might of the Zelthor was a grim reminder of how fragile human civilization was. But there were still pockets of resistance. In the chaos of the invasion, military leaders and government officials scrambled to react, but the world's infrastructure was in tatters. Nations fell, governments crumbled, and people scattered into the wilderness, fighting back where they could. In these dark hours, a few human leaders recognized something others had overlooked: the very nature of humanity was not one of brute strength, but of ingenuity. Dr. Elizabeth Drake, a former weapons designer turned strategist, was one of those leaders. She had spent her career studying alien technology, convinced that humanity's best hope for survival lay in finding a way to outsmart their invaders. In secret, she had begun gathering a team of scientists, engineers, and military tacticians, a mix of the brightest minds humanity had to offer. As the Zelthor forces began their ground assault, Earth's major cities crumbled under the weight of their invaders. Yet, amidst the devastation, the human spirit remained unbroken. Across the world, resistance cells formed, each one fighting in their own way. It was not large-scale military action that kept humanity's hope alive, it was the small acts of rebellion, the acts of defiance that ignited the flame of resistance. In a hidden underground bunker, Dr. Drake and her team worked feverishly. They realized that brute force was not an option. The Zelthor's shields were impenetrable, and their weapons could annihilate anything in their path. No amount of human firepower would ever stand up to the overwhelming might of the invaders. But humans had something that the Zelthor did not: creativity. Dr. Drake's plan was simple but risky. She proposed that humanity stop trying to fight the Zelthor on their terms and instead use their own strength, adaptability, innovation, and the element of surprise. Humans had the unique ability to think outside the box, to make leaps in understanding that could change the course of history in the blink of an eye. The first step was to analyze the Zelthor's weaknesses. Their technology, while advanced, relied on biological systems that could be exploited. The Zelthor had never encountered a species capable of altering the biological processes of their enemies. But the humans had one major advantage: they could adapt to anything. Working in secret, Dr. Drake's team began developing a weapon that could disrupt the Zelthor's biological systems, making them vulnerable to human tactics. The weapon was still in its early stages, but they had no time to waste. The Zelthor were getting closer to achieving their ultimate goal: total domination of Earth. As the resistance groups continued to carry out small acts of sabotage and guerrilla tactics, humanity's greatest weapon was being forged in the shadows: human ingenuity. It was in these quiet moments, as humans fought against impossible odds, that the true spark of resistance ignited. They were not helpless. They were not powerless. They were far more dangerous than the Zelthor could ever understand. Humanity's fight for survival had only just begun. The weeks following the initial wave of destruction were a blur of chaos. Earth's major cities were reduced to rubble, and the Zelthor Empire seemed unstoppable. Yet, even in the midst of this destruction, something extraordinary began to take shape in secret. Humanity's survival depended on one thing: the creation of a weapon unlike any the Zelthor had ever seen. Dr. Elizabeth Drake and her team of scientists, engineers, and military tacticians had worked tirelessly in hidden laboratories deep beneath the Earth's surface. The world above them was a war zone, but down here, amidst the whirring of machines and the hum of advanced tech, a plan was coming to life. The weapon they were developing wasn't one of sheer destructive force, it was something subtler, something more insidious. The humans had discovered that the Zelthor's technology was heavily biological in nature. Their ships, their weapons, even their shields were all powered by living organisms, complex biosystems that had been genetically engineered over millennia. This reliance on biology was both their strength and their greatest vulnerability. Dr. Drake's team had found a way to exploit this. They had developed a biochemical agent, codenamed Vigilance, that could affect the Zelthor's internal systems, disrupting their neural networks and rendering their bodies temporarily incapacitated. The agent didn't kill, it merely disabled, making them vulnerable to human tactics and attacks. It was a weapon of precision, designed not to obliterate, but to paralyze. A weapon that would allow humans to strike the Zelthor at their most vulnerable point, their biology. The team's first tests were promising, but there was one problem. The agent needed to be dispersed over a wide area to be effective, and humanity had no way of delivering it en masse without risking detection by the Zelthor. They had no fleet to speak of, no large armies capable of carrying out such a mission. They had only their small bands of resistance fighters, scattered and outgunned. Yet it was in this very limitation that humanity's ingenuity began to shine. If they couldn't overwhelm the Zelthor through force, they would do so through cunning. Dr. Drake proposed an unconventional solution: guerrilla tactics, small-scale strikes, and strategic sabotage. The goal wasn't to destroy the Zelthor outright, but to keep them off balance, constantly reacting, never allowing them to fully focus on their conquest of Earth. The resistance fighters, many of whom were ordinary civilians, became the key to this plan. They were not soldiers, but they were determined. They were farmers, teachers, engineers, and students, people who had no experience in warfare but who had been forced into a brutal new reality. And it was this very adaptability that made them such effective fighters. They were quick to learn and even quicker to innovate. They adapted to their environment, building weapons out of whatever they could find, improvising explosives from everyday household chemicals, and using their knowledge of local geography to launch surprise attacks on Zelthor supply lines. Humanity's strength, Dr. Drake realized, was not in numbers, but in spirit. The world's militaries were broken, but the human will to survive was unyielding. One night, under the cover of darkness, the first test of vigilance was set into motion. A small group of resistance fighters infiltrated a Zelthor outpost on the outskirts of what was once Chicago. The Zelthor had set up a base of operations to process Earth's resources, unaware that the humans were already planning their strike. The humans had created a makeshift delivery system for the biochemical agent, drones, simple and unassuming, but effective. Each drone was packed with vigilance, designed to disperse the agent into the air in a controlled burst. The goal was to infect the Zelthor soldiers stationed at the outpost, disabling their neural networks and leaving them vulnerable to human attack. The operation was risky. If the Zelthor detected the drones, they would surely destroy them before they could release the agent. But the humans had one advantage: the element of surprise. The drones flew low, blending in with the night sky, and before the Zelthor could react, the agent had been released. Within minutes, the Zelthor soldiers began to fall, their bodies jerking as the agent disrupted their internal systems. They were not dead, but they were immobilized, unable to defend themselves. The resistance fighters, armed with makeshift weapons and sheer determination, stormed the outpost, taking control before the Zelthor could respond. It was a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. For the first time since the invasion began, humanity had struck back with a weapon that could shift the balance of power. The Zelthor were no longer invulnerable. And though it was only a single skirmish, the resistance knew that this was just the beginning. Humanity had discovered a new kind of weapon, the power of the mind, the ability to innovate and adapt in the face of impossible odds. With this knowledge, they would begin to fight back on a larger scale. They had shown the galaxy that even the smallest species could rise up and challenge the giants. The fight for Earth was far from over, but humanity had found its spark of resistance. And it was only a matter of time before that spark turned into a fire. The small victory at the Zelthor outpost sent shockwaves through both human and alien forces alike. Humanity's use of vigilance had proven not only that they could outsmart the Zelthor, but that they could stand toe-to-toe with one of the most powerful empires in the galaxy. The news of the successful strike spread quickly among the scattered resistance cells, each one now seeing hope where there had been none before. For the first time, humans had tasted the possibility of victory, and they were hungry for more. The fight had shifted. Earth was no longer simply a battlefield, it was a symbol of defiance, a beacon to other species that even in the darkest of times, humanity could rise above the impossible. As the human resistance cells grew bolder, more frequent strikes against the Zelthor outposts and supply lines followed. Using the momentum of their success, humanity launched a series of smaller raids on Zelthor-controlled territories. Each attack was calculated, aimed at disabling or crippling the invaders' infrastructure, never allowing them a moment's respite. Dr. Elizabeth Drake's biochemical weapon, Vigilance, was proving to be the game-changer humanity needed. It was refined and improved with each iteration, growing more effective in neutralizing the Zelthor's strength. But there was a crucial aspect of the plan that still needed work. The humans didn't have the numbers or the firepower to engage the Zelthor in a direct, full-scale battle. Even with their biochemical weapon, they would be crushed if they tried to face the Zelthor's might head-on. That's when Dr. Drake came up with a daring idea. Humanity needed to hit the Zelthor at their most vulnerable point, their homeworld. While the Zelthor controlled much of the galaxy, Earth was a planet of unique biological diversity, rich in untapped resources, and it held the key to humanity's greatest potential weapon, *Vigilance*, on a global scale. If humanity could infiltrate the heart of the Zelthor's empire, they could find a way to disable the Zelthor's main fleet, forcing them to retreat or negotiate for peace. But the journey to the Zelthor homeworld would be perilous. The human fleet, though bolstered by salvage technology and captured alien ships, was still far smaller than the vast armada that the Zelthor controlled. The plan was simple: infiltrate the Zelthor's territory, reach their capital planet, and deliver a massive payload of vigilance into their command centers. It would cripple the Zelthor's leadership and leave them scrambling to maintain control. The human fleet, led by Captain Marcus Cole, a battle-hardened veteran who had survived the first wave of invasion, prepared for this daring mission. Cole had seen the destruction firsthand and understood that the stakes were higher than ever. The Zelthor had underestimated humanity's resilience, but they wouldn't make that mistake again. Earth was their final stronghold, and if humanity couldn't break the Zelthor's stranglehold, there would be no future. Human ships, though vastly outnumbered, were able to sneak past the Zelthor's outer defenses under the cover of darkness. The fleet's path was fraught with peril, and every jump through hyperspace brought them closer to the heart of enemy territory. But the humans had come prepared. Every vessel in their fleet was equipped with the latest modifications, using scavenged technology from downed Zelthor ships. Stealth became their ally, and with each successful strike, they gained ground in the shadows. Meanwhile, on Earth, the Resistance continued its guerrilla warfare against the Zelthor's hold on the planet. These small cells carried out sabotage missions, disabling communication hubs and attacking supply routes, ensuring the Zelthor had their hands full with distractions as humanity's fleet made its way toward their homeworld. Dr. Drake's research continued, finding new ways to enhance vigilance and its effects on the Zelthor. But the clock was ticking. The Zelthor were preparing for a full-scale retaliation, bringing reinforcements from across the galaxy. As the human fleet made its way to the capital system of the Zelthor, a new level of tension settled in. This mission was unlike anything humanity had ever faced. It wasn't just about survival anymore, it was about reclaiming Earth's place in the galaxy, about proving that the human race was far from extinct. In the minds of many, the success of this mission would determine the fate of not only Earth, but the future of all sentient life in the galaxy. The fleet reached the outskirts of the Zelthor capital system, and the full scope of the enemy's power became clear. The Zelthor homeworld, a massive planet orbiting a dying star, was surrounded by a heavily fortified ring of battle stations and defensive structures. The human fleet had only one shot. If they were detected before they could deliver the weapon, they would be obliterated. Captain Cole, standing at the helm of the lead ship, could feel the weight of the mission bearing down on him. His eyes scanned the stars ahead, knowing that the human race's very survival depended on the success of this strike. It was now or never. The human fleet, composed of a motley group of ships, from hastily reconstructed civilian craft to stolen Zelthor war vessels, hovered just outside the massive fortress surrounding the Zelthor capital planet. Captain Marcus Cole stood in the command center of the lead ship, the Vanguard, his hands gripping the console as he surveyed the tactical readouts. This was it. The Zelthor homeworld loomed ahead, a planet encased in a ring of defense platforms, their weapons trained on any approaching ship. Humanity had made it this far, but the real challenge had only just begun. The fleet was outnumbered and outgunned, but the element of surprise was their greatest ally. The Zelthor had no idea the humans were this close. "We make our move now," Cole said, his voice low and resolute. On the bridge, the crew moved with disciplined precision, readying the fleet for the most critical mission in humanity's history. The Zelthor's defenses would need to be bypassed if they were to have any hope of reaching the planet's surface. They had no time to waste, their window of opportunity was brief, and their chance of success was slim. But they had no choice. A hush fell over the command center as the fleet began to maneuver into position. The Zelthor defense network was formidable, and their ships were capable of detecting even the slightest anomaly in the fabric of space. The human ships were small, designed for stealth, but they weren't invisible. It was only a matter of time before the Zelthor noticed them. Dr. Elizabeth Drake's voice crackled through Cole's communicator. "Captain, we've perfected the latest version of Vigilance. This is the final chance to disable the Zelthor's leadership systems. We've adjusted the payload to target the central command centers on the surface. Once it's released, they'll be paralyzed." Cole's jaw tightened. There was no turning back. "Copy that, Dr. Drake. We're going in." The fleet moved as one, cutting through the darkness of space toward the heart of the Zelthor Empire. The ships were silent, their engines throttled down to minimize their signatures. The Zelthor stations loomed closer, massive structures that could wipe out entire fleets in a single volley. But the humans had a plan, one that hinged on speed and precision. Cole's voice rang out in the comms. "Engage cloaking. Proceed to coordinates Alpha 7. The lead ship, the Vanguard, followed by the rest of the fleet, cloaked itself and began to weave through the Zelthor defenses, slipping past sensor sweeps as best as possible. The stealth technology they had scavenged from Zelthor wreckage worked like a charm, masking their ships from the most advanced tracking systems. It wasn't perfect, there were still gaps in the defense grid, and if the Zelthor noticed the slightest fluctuation in spacetime, they would open fire. Time seemed to stretch as the fleet inched closer to the surface. The Zelthor defense platforms rotated slowly, unaware of the human ships infiltrating their territory. The distance between the fleet and the target site, Zelthor Central Command, was narrowing rapidly. Only one opportunity would present itself to drop the Vigilance payload and cripple the invaders' leadership. "Prepare the payloads," Cole ordered. In the belly of each human ship, the Vigilance biochemical agent was carefully loaded into drones, designed to break through the atmosphere, release the agent, and target the heart of Zelthor operations. They had to hit the Central Command and the communication hubs. If they could isolate the leadership, the rest of the Zelthor forces would fall into disarray, unable to coordinate effectively. But it wasn't just about destroying the Zelthor, it was about sending a message to the galaxy. Humanity was no longer a victim. They were a force to be reckoned with. Suddenly, the alert sounded. "Enemy lock detected," the radar officer called out. "They've noticed us. They're locking onto the Vanguard." The Zelthor had spotted the fleet. "Engage evasive maneuvers," Cole shouted. The fleet broke formation as enemy fire lit up the dark void of space. The Zelthor's massive guns began to target the human ships, and explosions rang out in space as the first wave of laser fire impacted near the vanguard. The shields flickered, holding strong, but only just. "Push forward," Cole barked, his voice steady despite the chaos. "We can't afford to turn back now." The fleet powered through, their cloaks flickering under the barrage of Zelthor fire. Humanity had only one shot at this. As they neared the atmosphere of the Zelthor homeworld, they deployed the drones. The drones, small, almost inconspicuous, raced toward the surface, each one carrying its payload of vigilance. They flew through the chaos, dodging incoming fire, their sleek shapes slicing through the atmosphere as they neared the Zelthor Central Command. On Earth, Dr. Drake watched as the drones began their descent. The fate of humanity rested on these fragile, mechanical messengers. She could only hope that they would deliver. The world trembled as vigilance rained down upon the Zelthor Central Command systems. The first signs of success were immediate. Zelthor commanders froze in place, their bodies locking up as their neural systems were interrupted by the agent. The strike was a success, but the enemy was far from defeated. "Target acquired," Cole said, his voice tense. "We've made our move. Now we watch the fall of the giants." But the Zelthor were not defeated yet. The war was far from over. The strike on the Zelthor homeworld was a gamble. The vigilance payloads had delivered their intended effect, crippling the Central Command and sending the Zelthor leadership into disarray. But the victory, while significant, had not shattered their empire. The Zelthor were resilient, and even though their primary command centers were now incapacitated, their military might was far from diminished. The true test of humanity's resolve had only just begun. On the surface of the Zelthor homeworld, the scene was chaotic. As the effects of vigilance spread, Zelthor officers and commanders staggered, their bodies betraying them as their neural systems struggled to cope with the biochemical disruption. But there was an undeniable danger: their military might was still strong. The Zelthor had vast armies of soldiers, biological and mechanical, that were still operational, and they were enraged. The human fleet had barely managed to avoid destruction on their approach to the planet. But now that their mission was completed, they faced another pressing problem: escape. The remaining Zelthor forces were massing, regrouping, and preparing for retaliation. And they would not stop until humanity was eradicated. Inside the Vanguard, Captain Cole stared at the tactical screens, his jaw clenched. The ship was a marvel of human ingenuity, stripped down, improvised, but capable. The fleet had done what they came to do, but the Zelthor were now fully aware of the threat humanity posed. This would not be a quiet retreat. "Status report," Cole demanded, his voice firm. "We've hit the primary command, but the Zelthor still have their secondary systems intact," the communications officer replied. "They're scrambling to regain control. The reinforcements are en route, Zelthor warships are already en route to intercept us." The truth hit Captain Cole like a ton of bricks. The fleet couldn't stay in the Zelthor system much longer. They were too outnumbered, and their ships couldn't sustain the punishment from a full-scale Zelthor counterattack. The fleet had been built for stealth and sabotage, not open combat. "Prepare the fleet for a tactical retreat," Cole ordered. "We need to get out of here, now." But there was one more thing to do. "We can't leave without knowing if it worked," Cole muttered under his breath. The vigilance had been released, and their mission was a success on one level, but they needed to see the results, see if the Zelthor leadership had been completely incapacitated. If they could cripple the entire leadership structure of the Empire, it would buy Earth time to rebuild, regroup, and fight back. Dr. Drake's voice came over the comms again, this time urgent and strained. "Captain, we're receiving scattered reports that the vigilance has triggered a cascading effect throughout their neural systems. Their command structure is in shambles, but it won't last. They'll adapt. If you don't extract now, the retaliation will be swift." "We'll buy ourselves some time," Cole said, determination settling in. "Move the fleet back toward the outer rim. I'll send a team down to confirm the effects. We need to know just how much damage we've done." The human fleet began its retreat, the ship slowly pulling away from the atmosphere and drifting back into space. Zelthor warships, massive and armored, appeared on the edge of the system, their weapons powering up. A battle was imminent. The humans had done the impossible, they had struck at the heart of the Zelthor Empire. Now it was time to hold on to their lives long enough to see if it would break them. Down on the planet's surface, a small team of resistance fighters led by Lieutenant Sofia Alvarez, a veteran of Earth's earlier battles with the Zelthor, had been sent to confirm the success of the mission. They were equipped with portable scanners and were tasked with accessing Zelthor command centers deep within the capital city. The fight for the planet's surface was raging. Zelthor soldiers still fought back in large numbers, but they were no longer coordinated, no longer unified. This disarray gave the humans a glimmer of hope. The team worked quickly, pushing through the chaotic streets of the Zelthor capital, navigating the wreckage of their city as Zelthor soldiers faltered in their efforts. When they reached the Central Command facility, Alvarez ordered her team to infiltrate and secure the building. The once pristine halls of Zelthor power were now littered with bodies, both Zelthor and their mechanical minions lying in strange, contorted positions, as if their very biology had betrayed them. "Report back, Lieutenant," Dr. Drake's voice crackled through their comms. "How extensive is the damage?" "It's extensive," Alvarez responded, her voice low with disbelief. "Their command structure is crippled. The remaining leaders are scrambling, but there's no clear chain of command. The Vigilance is doing exactly what we hoped. They're disoriented. We've destabilized them." The resistance team planted charges throughout the building's data core, securing their findings and preparing to leave. They had done their job, they had confirmed that the Zelthor were teetering on the edge of collapse. But as they moved to extract, a wave of Zelthor reinforcements arrived, drawn by the chaos. The humans barely escaped, losing one of their own in the process, but they had the information they needed. The team returned to the ships just as the remaining Zelthor warships began their assault. The escape was a harrowing, all-out retreat, with every ship in the fleet using every last drop of fuel to slip through the narrowing gap between them and the pursuing armada. With a series of precise hyperspace jumps, they made their way to a hidden safe zone, but the cost had been high. Captain Cole stood on the bridge, watching the warships fade into the distance. The first phase of humanity's counterattack had been successful, but the road ahead was far from certain. Earth had struck a powerful blow, but the Zelthor Empire was not finished yet. The war was far from over, and humanity had just made its first move in what would be a long, hard-fought campaign. And as the humans caught their breath in the quiet aftermath, one thing was clear: Earth had become a symbol of defiance, and the Zelthor would never forget that humanity had dared to challenge them. The human fleet, battered but alive, drifted into the safety of a remote system in the outer reaches of the galaxy. The battle with the Zelthor was far from over, but the first phase of humanity's bold strike had succeeded. For the first time, the Zelthor Empire was reeling. The decimation of their leadership had disrupted their carefully constructed command structure, and though they were attempting to regroup, the damage was undeniable. Humanity had become the thorn in their side, and they would not forget it. Captain Marcus Cole stood on the bridge of the Vanguard, watching as the fleet took formation around the desolate moon they had taken refuge on. His crew moved with a quiet intensity, all of them aware of the gravity of the situation. The Zelthor had suffered a major blow, but that didn't mean they were finished. Their empire was vast, their military vast, and they would retaliate with everything they had. "We've got a moment to breathe, but it won't last long," Cole said, his eyes scanning the ship's tactical displays. "The Zelthor will be hunting us down soon enough. They'll know we can hit them where it hurts. We need to plan our next move." Dr. Elizabeth Drake's voice came over the comms. "Captain, I've analyzed the data we gathered from their systems. The Vigilance agent caused significant damage to their central command and neural networks, but it hasn't completely crippled them. The Zelthor are recovering faster than expected. They'll adapt. We don't have time to wait for them to rebuild," Cole responded, clenching his fists. "We've shaken their command, but now we need to strike before they can regroup. We need to hit them at their supply lines. Disrupt their flow of resources and troops, weaken their forces to the point where they can't retaliate. Drake hesitated for a moment before answering. It's a risky move, but it might work. We can disrupt their logistics, but it will require precision. We'll need to make a series of smaller strikes, weakening them bit by bit. The plan was set into motion. The human fleet would launch a series of targeted raids on Zelthor supply hubs, cutting off their ability to reinforce their forces and resupply their fleets. It wasn't enough to simply defeat the Zelthor in battle. Humanity had to dismantle their infrastructure, the very foundation of their empire. As the fleet prepared for their first strike, Cole gathered his senior officers for a briefing. Our objective is simple, he said, his voice steady. We need to hit them where it hurts most. Supply lines, manufacturing hubs, fuel depots. We'll move fast, hit hard, and get out before they can react. The Zelthor won't expect a force this small to take on their empire like this, but that's exactly why it will work. Lieutenant Sofia Alvarez, the veteran who had led the team on the surface of the Zelthor homeworld, stepped forward. We've got the element of surprise on our side. They're not expecting us to strike in such rapid succession. But we need to be prepared for their retaliation. They won't leave us unchecked. Exactly, Cole replied. We'll need to move like shadows. One strike, and then we vanish before they can even blink. The first target was a massive Zelthor supply depot hidden in a remote asteroid field. The fleet moved swiftly, using their stealth technology to slip past Zelthor patrols undetected. Once in position, the fleet launched a series of surgical strikes, destroying key infrastructure and crippling the depot's ability to produce or distribute supplies. The operation was a success, and the human fleet quickly retreated back into deep space before the Zelthor could react. But it was only the beginning. Over the next several days, the human fleet struck repeatedly, each mission carefully planned and executed. They targeted Zelthor supply routes, ambushing convoys, and sabotaging key installations. Each successful raid made the Zelthor more desperate, but also more dangerous. Captain Cole watched the reports flood in as the raids continued. Every successful strike was a small victory, but the enemy was beginning to adapt. Zelthor warships had begun to appear in the regions where humanity had operated, looking for any sign of their elusive enemies. Time is running out, Cole said grimly. We can't keep moving in the shadows forever. They're getting better at tracking us. We need to hit them with something bigger, something decisive. Dr. Drake's voice came over the comms again. Captain, we've developed a new weapon, something that could break the Zelthor once and for all. But it's untested. It's a long shot. Cole turned toward the screen displaying Dr. Drake's face, his brow furrowed. What do you have? Dr. Drake's face was a mixture of excitement and concern. We've developed a hypercharged vigilance agent. If we can get close enough to their central fleet, we can release it into their core systems. It will cause a total neural shutdown, not just in their leadership but in every soldier, every machine, every biological unit they command. It could incapacitate them for days, maybe longer. The result would be total chaos in their ranks. But it's dangerous, Cole said, his mind racing. If it works, it could break them. But if it fails... It's our best shot, Drake replied. Without it, the Zelthor will recover too quickly. We need to strike the heart of their fleet before they can adapt. This weapon could give us the advantage we need to finish what we started. The decision was made. Humanity would take the fight to the Zelthor's capital fleet, the beating heart of their military might. It was a desperate move, one that would either break the Zelthor or push humanity into the jaws of annihilation. As the fleet prepared for its final assault, Cole stood before his crew, his voice resolute. We've come this far. We've taken down their command, hit their supply lines, and destabilized their empire. Now, we finish what we started. This is our moment. No more shadows. No more retreats. We fight, and we win. The fleet moved out, its course set for the heart of the Zelthor Empire. Every human aboard knew that this was a mission that would either win the war, or end it all. And with that, humanity's greatest weapon was about to be unleashed. The fleet moved silently through the void, every ship cloaked and in perfect formation. Captain Marcus Cole stood on the bridge of the Vanguard, his eyes locked on the distant stars ahead. The final strike was imminent. The Zelthor, though wounded, still loomed as a terrifying presence in the galaxy. But humanity had learned how to fight back. They had learned to strike swiftly, to adapt, and to exploit their enemies' weaknesses. "We're ready," said Lieutenant Sofia Alvarez, her voice steady. She had seen it all, the horrors of the war, the losses, and the victories. Now, she stood at the edge of the final battle. Captain Cole nodded. "Set the course. We're going in. No retreat." The fleet accelerated, making its way toward the heart of the Zelthor military, the capital fleet, a massive formation of warships that had gathered to exact revenge for the strikes against their supply lines. This was the ultimate confrontation, and humanity's future rested on their ability to land the final blow. The Zelthor had already suffered from the Vigilance Agent, and their once pristine military organization was in disarray. But the battle was far from won. Dr. Elizabeth Drake's voice came over the comms, a slight tremor of tension in her words. "The hypercharged Vigilance is ready. The moment we're in range, we deploy. Once the agent is released, it'll spread across their fleet's neural systems. But we need to get close. No more than 5 minutes to deploy, or we'll risk the fleet adapting." "Understood," Cole replied. "We'll get you close." As the fleet neared the enemy formation, the tension in the command center grew palpable. The Zelthor ships were enormous, their sleek designs intimidating. They had been waiting for this moment, ready to avenge their shattered command structure, ready to wipe humanity off the map. But they didn't know what was coming. "Engage evasive maneuvers," Cole ordered as Zelthor warships began to turn toward the approaching fleet. The moment they fired, it would be too late. The human ships had one chance to strike, and then, they had to vanish. The Zelthor were faster to react than anticipated. Massive beams of energy shot from their warships, lighting up the cold expanse of space. But humanity had anticipated this, too. The Vanguard and the rest of the fleet dodged and weaved through the incoming fire, their advanced cloaking technology masking their movements and throwing off the Zelthor's targeting systems. The human ships were smaller, more nimble, and that made them harder to hit. Cole gritted his teeth as the final approach began. The Zelthor were closing in, their warships blocking any retreat. Time was running out. "Just a little closer," Cole muttered, his eyes locked on the lead Zelthor command ship. The moment the enemy opened fire, the Vigilance payload would be released. Then, with a sudden surge, the enemy ships fired. The beams cut through space, creating deadly trails of light. In the chaos, Cole saw the opportunity. The fleet was in range. "Deploy the agent," he barked. Drake's team released the hypercharged Vigilance into the enemy fleet's core systems. The device shot forward, a gleaming, deadly projectile that pierced the heart of the Zelthor formation. In seconds, it detonated, releasing the agent into the vast expanse of the Zelthor fleet's neural infrastructure. The ship's systems began to flicker, their neural connections unraveling as the agent took hold. The first signs of success were immediate. The Zelthor ships began to slow, their movements erratic. Communications between their warships broke down, their once flawless coordination disintegrating into chaos. It was as if a switch had been flipped. The fleets were now paralyzed, each ship locked in place as if time itself had stopped. Captain Cole's heart raced. They had done it. The Zelthor were falling apart before their eyes. But they had little time to savor the victory. The agent would only last for a limited time before the Zelthor recovered. "Now, Captain!" Alvarez shouted. "We need to finish them off while they're down." Cole didn't hesitate. "All ships, fire at will." The human fleet unleashed a barrage of concentrated fire on the now vulnerable Zelthor warships. With their central control systems in disarray, the Zelthor ships could no longer defend themselves effectively. Laser beams, missiles, and explosives rained down on their once pristine hulls. Each impact sent shockwaves through the enemy formation, disintegrating ships and sending others into a spiraling descent. The Zelthor retaliated, but their response was sluggish, disorganized. The chaos that had once been their greatest strength was now their greatest weakness. The human fleet struck with precision, exploiting every vulnerability. For the first time in the war, the Zelthor were not the hunters, they were the hunted. Despite the overwhelming odds, humanity's victory felt bittersweet. The battle was far from over. The Zelthor might be temporarily incapacitated, but they would not give up so easily. They would rebuild. But the message had been sent. Humanity was no longer a small, insignificant species to be crushed under the boot of galactic empires. They had proven themselves to be the ultimate weapon. As the last Zelthor warship exploded in a burst of fire, Captain Cole exhaled a long, heavy breath. The fleet had done it. The war was not over, but this was the turning point. The Zelthor Empire had been fractured, its dominance broken. Humanity had risen from the ashes of their homeworld, fighting against impossible odds, and they had succeeded. The humans were no longer the prey, they were the predators. And the galaxy would never be the same again. Victory, Cole said softly, turning to his crew. But the fight isn't over. We've only just begun.